My name is Olivia Bennett, and the announcer had just said it for everyone to hear. Olivia Bennett, Bachelor of Arts in Psychology, The Ohio State University. Sound rolled across Ohio Stadium like a wave. Around me, caps glittered, bouquets flashed, and families rose to shout names over the roar. I searched the bleachers anyway, scanning for 3 faces I had pictured since freshman year. My mom, my dad, my sister. In my mind, there had always been a bright row of hands waving just for me. In real life, there was a pale strip of aluminum where I thought they would be. At 10:14 a.m., my phone buzzed with the kind of message that flattens a whole day. From Dad. Madison had a panic attack. We're on it. Promise we'll celebrate later. A minute later, Mom added, please understand. I read both lines again and again, waiting for something else to arrive. We're proud of you. We're on our way. Nothing came. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, swallowed hard, and kept moving with the river of scarlet gowns. When my name echoed the second time, I climbed the steps and took the diploma with careful hands. Cameras popped like fireworks, but none of them were turned toward me. I told myself it was fine, that I was used to being fine. And when my feet hit the ground again, I tried to breathe the way the speakers had told us to breathe. Inhale the moment. Exhale the past. It sounds easy until you are the one standing alone, smiling for courtesy and not for joy. Outside the stadium, the air was bright and loud. Parents held signs with inside jokes. Siblings argued about lunch plans. I asked a classmate to take one photo of me in the gown, just in case my grandfather wanted to frame it. My smile felt tight at the corners, like I had ironed it there. I thanked her, closed the camera, and walked toward the parking lot with the diploma pressed like a book against my ribs. The drive along I-70 felt longer than usual. Billboards promised 100 kinds of happiness. I kept seeing those empty seats and trying to give them a kinder story. Medical emergency. Car trouble. Sudden storm on the lake back in Parma. Every story I tried on still fit the same shape. I was not the priority. I had not been the priority for years. The thought made my chest ache in a dull, familiar way, the way you press a bruise to check if it still hurts. Back at my apartment, I hung the gown over a chair and laid the cap on the desk with the tassel lined up just so. The room was quiet, not in a peaceful way, but in the way that makes your heartbeat sound too loud. I took a mirror photo for my grandfather, Samuel Whitaker, and typed, made it, because those 2 words were true. I had made it, and I had done it mostly by myself. That should have felt like enough. It didn't. I sat on the edge of the bed and replayed the morning from the start. The alarm at 6. The careful makeup. The coffee I only half drank. The walk through the tunnel beneath the stadium, where every graduate becomes a single file of hope. I thought about how I had pictured this day when I was 18, standing in our Parma kitchen with my acceptance email open. In that version, my family was there early with flowers, arguing about where to take pictures afterward. In this version, I had a message that used the word later to push today out of sight. I did not cry. I waited for the hurt to turn into something I could use, and when it finally settled into a clear, steady line of thought, I wrote it down so I would not forget. If later keeps swallowing the biggest days of my life, I will stop waiting for later. The sentence looked small on the page, but it felt like a door opening. I closed the notebook, put the diploma on the shelf where I could see it from the pillow, and let the stadium noise fade out of my head. By evening, the light came in low through the blinds and striped the room with gold. My phone lay face down on the desk. I knew I could pick it up and ask for a better explanation. I also knew what answer would come back. I chose stillness instead of another excuse. A plan was forming, something simple and calm. No scene, no argument, no speeches. Just the kind of choice you make when you finally believe your own eyes. Tonight, I would rest. Tomorrow, I would start acting like the person who earned that degree without anyone needing to clap. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Tell me where you're watching from and what part of this hits home for you. I'm reading the comments. In my house in Parma, Ohio, every problem had a simple answer. If Madison was upset, everything paused until she felt better. If I needed help, I already knew the right line to say to myself, "You're the strong one. You'll be fine." It sounded like praise the first dozen times I heard it. It became a boundary line I could never cross. Strong meant quiet. Strong meant last. Strong meant that when money, time, or energy ran short, my name slid off the list. Madison was sensitive. I was independent. Those labels did not describe us. They arranged us. I can trace the shape of it through small scenes. The last slice of birthday cake I wanted because the frosting had a red swirl. Save it for your sister. The Saturday, we voted between the state park and the mall. Madison isn't in the mood to hike. The school concert where I had a tiny solo and Mom held up a phone to record Madison's face in the audience instead. None of this felt like cruelty. It felt like air, always present and never named. I learned to pre-shrink my wants, so I would not be disappointed. High school sharpened the edges. I studied hard because it was the one thing I could control. When I won a statewide scholarship my junior year, I brought the certificate home in a folder so it would not crease. Dad glanced at it and said, "Of course you did," in a tone that was meant to be proud. Then he asked Madison about her follower count and whether her latest post had crossed 5 digits. That night, we went out to dinner. It was not for my scholarship. It was for her milestone. I remember chewing slowly so I would not cry. By the time I was applying to college, I had already absorbed the rule. If I did well, I had done what was expected. If Madison did anything at all, it was special. When I chose psychology, it was partly because I wanted to understand why love felt like a scale that never balanced. In lectures, I heard about family roles, triangulation, reinforcement, and the way attention can be used like a leash. I took notes as if the professor were reading my life aloud, only with calmer words. It helped to put names to things. It also hurt. Once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. I started noticing how often strong was used as permission to forget me. Strong kids don't need rides. Strong kids can eat later. Strong kids can handle it. I could handle it. That was the problem. I handled too much for too long, and the people who loved me mistook endurance for the absence of need. My quiet became the reason I did not get what I needed most. Still, there were places I felt visible. A teacher who wrote in the margin of my paper, "You argue like a scholar." A study group that let me lead and thanked me afterward. A neighbor who asked about my plans and listened to the answer without looking at her watch. And my grandfather, Samuel, who drove up from Cincinnati to see a poster I presented junior year. He handed me a small bag of butterscotch candies and said, "Excellence is not a bargaining chip. Keep yours." I didn't know until later that he was also helping my parents bridge their mortgage in hard months. He trusted them to be fair. I wanted to believe they were. If the family script had one sentence printed at the top, it would have said, "Keep Madison balanced, and the rest will fall into place." It never did. The more we protected her from tiny storms, the more the weather belonged to her. I learned this the slow way, over years, until the lesson finally appeared in a single sharp image on a metal bench at Ohio Stadium. 3 empty seats. I had always been fine. I was not fine now. I was done being strong in a way that made me small. Middle school was my first quiet fork in the road. I asked to try the robotics club at a school across town. The meetings were on Saturdays. The answer was, "It's a lot of driving, and your sister has photo shoots downtown those days." We did not say no. We said later. Later became never. I learned to like the photos and keep my hands busy with homework. Freshman year, our spring break vote looked democratic. We wrote options on slips of paper and dropped them into a bowl. The Smoky Mountains versus Fort Lauderdale. Dad shook the bowl and Mom drew a slip. "Fort Lauderdale," she read, cheerful. I checked the wastebasket an hour later and saw 3 slips crumpled under a paper towel. The handwriting matched mine. It did not matter. Madison wasn't in the mood for cabins. The beach got better light. Sophomore year, I joined a volunteer tutoring group after school. Mom asked me to be home earlier on Thursdays because the house felt calmer when I was there. "You're the steady one," she said, and kissed my hair. I quit tutoring the next week. The house did feel calmer when I was home. I grew stiller to keep it that way and tried not to notice that stillness is not the same as peace. Junior year brought my first big win, the scholarship that promised help with tuition. I brought the letter to the dinner table and angled the envelope so the seal showed. "I'm proud of you," Mom said, standing to clear plates. "You always come through." 10 minutes later, Dad asked if we could celebrate Madison's internship at a boutique firm. We did. I wore the new cardigan I had bought with babysitting money and told myself that sitting at the same table counted as celebration. Senior spring, the email from Ohio State arrived with a red block O in the corner and a line that started, "Congratulations." I printed it and stuck it on the fridge with a weak magnet that slid down over the afternoon. Dad took a picture and texted it to our family thread. No one replied for 6 hours. When Mom finally answered, it was to ask if anyone had seen her keys. That was the week I decided I would not announce big news. I would simply live it. College years were a split screen. On one side, I worked the library desk and learned the quiet music of a campus at night. On the other, I watched our family calendar bend itself around Madison's moods. If she was tired, dinner moved. If she was nervous, plans changed. When I posted good news, a research position, the dean's list, the replies were a thumbs up emoji and a heart. When Madison posted a paragraph about burnout, there was a family meeting and a decision to keep her space clear for rest. But there were anchors. I mentored first-year students who reminded me of me. I joined a resilience lab and helped run a small study that showed how people who name their boundaries sooner feel less resentment later. I found out what it was to be seen by people who did not need me to be small in order to feel okay. And once a month, there was a knock at my apartment door and my grandfather's voice calling. Got a minute? He always had time to listen. He always asked, "What do you want next?" Like the question itself was a gift. Looking back, I can see the pattern as a set of lights on a map. Each small cut glows. Alone, they are dim. Together, they make a road. That road led to the moment at Ohio Stadium when a message about a panic attack and a promise to celebrate later tried to take my day away from me. I had walked the long way around myself for 10 years. I was tired. I was ready to stand where I was and let the map redraw itself with me at the center of my own life. The night of graduation, I drove to Parma with a plan so simple it felt like a secret. I was going to ask for one thing, an honest sentence. We should have been there. I pulled into the driveway and sat with the engine ticking as it cooled. In the living room, the TV was low and blue. Mom held a mug between her palms. Dad leaned against the doorway. Madison was curled on the couch in an oversized hoodie, eyes pink around the edges. I stood in the archway and waited for someone to look up. Mom did first. "There she is," she said softly, like I had just come in from the rain. Dad added, "Big day, kiddo," and looked at Madison as if to check whether the words were safe to say. I told them the ceremony had been beautiful. I told them I had missed them. I asked for the sentence I had rehearsed in the car. "Can we say we should have been there?" No one spoke for a beat. Then Mom said, "We wanted to protect your sister." Dad said, "You know how these things go." "We were keeping things stable." Madison whispered, "I couldn't handle crowds today," not quite looking at me. The words settled into the room like dust. I nodded. I said I understood. I did understand. I had always understood. Understanding is not the same as being valued. I looked at the mantel while they talked, at the frames lined up like a timeline. 2 for Madison's senior photos. 1 for a family beach trip where I stood 3 steps to the left. 1 for me at 16, holding a certificate, the glass catching glare so my face was a white blur. I thought of the word later, how it had been stretched over so many moments that needed now. Later had covered birthdays. Later had covered wins. Later had covered the seat that should have had my mother's hand in it. I asked them for one more thing. "Please say you're proud of me." Mom said, "We are." Dad said, "Of course," in the tone he used when he was fixing a light bulb. It was not nothing. It was also not enough. There are sentences you say because they are true, and there are sentences you say because silence feels worse. I knew which kind I had just been given. Upstairs, my old room still smelled like the laundry soap we bought on sale. A stack of binders leaned in the corner. A journal sat in the top dresser drawer, full of lists I had made through the years. Classes to take, jobs to try, cities to visit, lines I would say when I finally spoke up. I opened to a blank page and drew a single box. Inside, I wrote, "Move out." I did not underline it. I did not add exclamation marks. I just studied the square until it felt real. At 11:40 p.m., I texted my grandfather. "Can I visit for a while?" He called instead of writing back. "Of course," he said. "I'll come by in the morning." No rush. We talked about my ceremony. We did not talk about the empty seats. When we hung up, I folded 3 sets of clothes into the small suitcase I used for weekend trips and set it by the door. If later was always going to win in this house, then I would stop playing against it. I slept until the sun drew a thin line across the carpet. In the kitchen, I poured coffee and rinsed the cup and left it in the rack to dry. Mom asked if I wanted pancakes. Dad offered to fix my wiper blade. I thanked them and told them I had things to do downtown. It wasn't a lie, not exactly. I did have things to do. I needed to start my life like I believed it belonged to me. I rolled the small suitcase across the tile. It sounded like a pencil on paper, drawing a new line. I came back mid-morning with 2 boxes I had picked up from a friend. I told myself I would pack calmly, say only what was necessary, and leave. Dad met me in the foyer and asked why I had luggage. I'm moving some things to Grandpa's, I said, setting the first box on the stairs. He frowned like I had told a joke without a punchline. That's dramatic, he said. We said, we'll celebrate later. Mom stepped out of the kitchen with a dish towel and tried a gentler tone. Sweetheart, yesterday was rough. Your sister needed us. You're strong. You'll be fine. The towel twisted in her hands. Madison stood behind her, arms crossed, eyes slightly swollen. One bad day for me, she said, and you act like it ruins your whole life. You can watch the ceremony online. She shrugged as if she had offered a solution. I set the second box down and rested my palms on the cardboard to keep them from shaking. This isn't about a video, I said. It's about the pattern. It's about the cake I didn't get because she needed it more. The trip that changed because she wasn't in the mood. The scholarship dinner we never had because likes were higher that night. It's about you using strong as a reason not to show up. My voice did not rise. It didn't need to. The room was already too full for shouting. Dad's jaw tightened. Don't rewrite history, he said. We did our best. Mom nodded quickly. Family means sacrifice, she added, like a proverb. And you know your sister is fragile. The word sat between us, important and heavy. Fragile. I thought of glass you wrap in paper and set on a high shelf that no one can reach. I thought of how being careful with one thing had taught us to drop everything else. I told them I was leaving with a bag and a few boxes. I told them I would be at Grandpa's for a while, getting ready for fall and the new program I had worked so hard to get into. I told them I loved them, and that love was not the same as letting the same hurt happen again. Madison blew out a breath through her nose and said, So you're punishing us? I shook my head. No, I said. I'm stopping the part where I punish myself. Silence moves differently in families. Sometimes it soothes. Sometimes it accuses. This one settled in the corners like dust. Dad finally said, You're overreacting, with the patience of a man reading a manual. Mom said, Let's talk about this when you've calmed down. I lifted the first box and carried it out to the porch. The day was very bright. The sky looked like it had been polished. I made 3 trips. On the last one, Madison blocked the hall. If you go, she said, don't expect me to fix things when they get weird with Mom and Dad. I almost laughed. You don't fix things, I said. You are the thing everyone is always fixing. It wasn't cruel in my mouth. It was just honest. She stepped aside. I rolled the suitcase over the threshold and felt the click of the door behind me the way you feel a stitch come loose. Something small. Something final. On the sidewalk, I took a breath that felt like it had been waiting for me since I was 16. The car door closed with a sound I knew by heart. My phone lit up with a call from Grandpa. I'm close, he said. Do you need help with the boxes? I told him I had them. I looked back at the house where yielding had been the rule and decided I would not carry that rule into the next room I entered. I would try a different word. Not strong as in silent. Strong as in steady. Strong as in choosing. Strong as in me. I was lifting the last box when a familiar sedan eased to the curb. My grandfather stepped out first, moving carefully, but with the straight-backed steadiness I had always trusted. Samuel Whitaker had a way of entering a space that made people quiet down without being told. He scanned my face, then the doorway behind me, and nodded once like he had already pieced together the larger shape of the morning. Let me help, he said, taking the box out of my hands without asking if I needed it. We set it in the trunk together. Then he asked, Do you want to go back in? The question wasn't about comfort. It was about finishing what needed to be finished. I said yes. Inside, Dad stood with his arms folded. Mom held herself still, as if being motionless would keep the room from tilting. Madison hovered near the hallway, her expression arranged somewhere between injury and impatience. Grandpa greeted each of them with a courtesy they didn't quite return. He has never liked beginning with accusations. He prefers facts that speak for themselves. Olivia tells me yesterday was her graduation, he said. She tells me you could not attend. No one answered. He turned his eyes to my parents. Is what she told me true about the pattern? That when Madison feels unsteady, everything else waits. The quiet stretched. Dad said, Families make choices. Mom added, We were keeping the peace. Madison stared at the floor. Grandpa exhaled slowly and rested one hand on the back of a chair. For the past 5 years, he said, I have been making choices too. I have supplemented your mortgage when business dipped. I have wired money to keep the lights on at your firm. I did those things believing you were building a house where both daughters were being raised with care. He glanced at me, then back at them. I see now I mistook quiet for fairness. The words did not boom. They landed with the finality of a signed document. Dad blinked hard. Mom's fingers tightened around the dish towel. She said, "We appreciate everything you've done, Dad." Then, too quickly, "We can make this right. We'll celebrate Olivia next weekend. We just need time." Grandpa did not react. He has sat through a lifetime of negotiations. He knows when a promise is air. "I won't be continuing the financial support," he said, the way a judge would read out an order he has considered. "Not because I want you punished. Because I won't fund a structure that harms one child to cushion another. If you need to sell the house, you will sell it. If the firm must shrink, it will shrink. You will learn to balance your household with the resources you earn." He paused. "And you will stop calling neglect sacrifice." For a moment, the room seemed to tilt on its axis. Dad said, "We can't survive without that bridge." Mom whispered, "Please, don't take it out on us because she's making a scene." She didn't look at me when she said it. She looked at the hand that paid the bills. The clarity of that small choice was more instructive than any lecture I had ever heard. Madison finally spoke. "My mental health isn't a scene," she said, lifting her chin. Grandpa turned to her, calm and steady. "Then treat it with the seriousness it deserves," he said. "Professional help. Personal responsibility. Neither of those requires your sister's milestones to disappear." He put a hand on my shoulder. "My guest room is ready," he said to me, as if we were discussing an ordinary weekend. "Stay as long as you need." The invitation didn't feel like rescue. It felt like recognition. I said yes. Not with triumph, not with a slam of the door, but with the kind of quiet that holds. We carried the suitcase out together. Behind us, Dad started listing figures under his breath, inventorying the firm's accounts. Mom murmured about timing and appearances, the words blurring into each other. No one asked me to stay because of love. They asked him to keep the money moving. That difference was the final lesson I needed. On the porch, Grandpa said, "You don't owe anyone a performance today." I nodded. We loaded the trunk. When I shut it, the latch caught with a clean click that reminded me of the moment a picture frame finally sits straight on a nail. Inside, a life had been arranged around a fragile center. Outside, a new arrangement was possible. We pulled away from the curb without looking back at the windows. If this story resonates, tap subscribe and share your own turning point below. Your words might be the sign someone else needs today. Cincinnati met me with a wide porch, a neat row of hostas along the walk, and a house that was quiet in a way I didn't have to manage. Grandpa showed me the guest room with a view of a maple that caught the morning light. He had set out clean towels and stacked 2 paperbacks on the nightstand. He asked if I wanted coffee in the morning at 7 or 8. The question held more care than most of the grand gestures I had grown up around. The first days had a rhythm that felt like a reset. I woke early, read for an hour, sent emails about my fall start at Case Western Reserve University, and filled in logistics for housing near University Circle. In the afternoons, I walked the neighborhood and let my brain idle in a way it hadn't in years. I cooked simple dinners for the 2 of us and listened to stories from Grandpa's first years at the courthouse, how plain speech keeps people honest, how the quietest no can do the most work. My phone, which had been steady as a metronome for years, went strange. The messages from my parents started with apologies that smelled like fresh paint and moved quickly into plans that were about me only as a lever. "Come home for Sunday dinner," Mom wrote. Madison had a hard couple of days. Dad added, "We can celebrate next week. Bring your diploma for a photo." When I didn't answer, the tone shifted. "You're being ungrateful. We sacrificed so much. Don't make your grandfather angry." I recognized the shape. Remorse as prelude to control. So I tried something I had learned in my resilience lab notes. A test that isn't a trap. "I'll consider visiting," I texted, "if Madison moves into her own place by the end of the month. She's 26. She has a job. She can stand up on her own." I hit send and set the phone face down. I didn't plan to go back no matter what they said. I needed to know whether the family I had in my head existed anywhere outside of my hope. Silence settled. Hours became a day, then 2. Not the dramatic kind that rattles the windows. The kind that confirms what you already knew. When a response finally appeared, it was a list of reasons why Madison shouldn't be pushed, followed by a paragraph about appearances and how the neighbors would read my absence. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The test had already done its work. I met with a professor over video about assistantship options in Cleveland. I found a small studio on a quiet street not far from campus and ran the numbers twice, then once more, because I was building a budget that didn't require anyone else's mood to hold. In the evenings, Grandpa and I ate on the porch. He kept his questions gentle. What surprised you today? What are you not saying out loud yet? Being asked those questions felt like drinking water when you didn't know you were thirsty. On the fourth night, I told him about the test. He didn't flinch. You gave them a clean chance to choose responsibility, he said. People tell you who they are when you stop explaining for them. I nodded. We watched the maples shift in the wind, each leaf doing its own small work. The next morning, I cleared out my old voicemail box and deleted 3 entire threads that had turned into weather reports for someone else's sky. A boundary is not a wall. It is a door you keep your hand on. You open it for what is healthy and close it to what asks you to disappear. In Cincinnati, I practiced closing it. Not with anger, not with a speech. With breakfast at the same time each day. With a lease signed in my own name. With a calendar that listed my classes first. The world did not end. The world, for the first time, fit. I had one last errand at Ohio State. Paperwork for the research lab I'd helped run. I told myself the campus would feel like a goodbye scene. It felt like muscle memory. I parked near student services and walked past the brick I knew by touch. When I stepped into the shade by the entrance, I heard my name called in a voice that once made me freeze before I knew why. Madison stood 10 feet away, sunglasses propped on her head, posture set to indignant. We need to talk, she said, loud enough for strangers to look around. A few students slowed. I stayed where I was and waited. She didn't ask if I had time. She began. You're tearing the family apart, she said. Mom can't sleep. Dad's sick about the money. You set them up with that condition so you could feel righteous. She swung the word like a hammer. I kept my voice even. I set a boundary, I said. You're 26. Moving out is normal. She laughed without humor. Normal is not our family. You know that. I nodded. I do. That's why I'm changing it. Her mouth curled. You've always wanted to be the victim, she said. You like the attention. You like making me the villain. The sentence had a shine on it from long use. I watched it pass between us and drop. The day I graduated, I said, I asked for one thing. I asked to be seen. I let the word stand. I'm not calling you a villain. I'm saying I won't disappear so you can feel better anymore. Something in her expression flickered. She stepped closer, crowding the space, and set her palm against my shoulder in a push that was more about habit than force. My body remembered old instructions: yield, soften, make way. I didn't move. Don't, I said, not loud, not sharp, just final. A couple of students paused outright now. Madison's face flushed. Or what, she snapped. You'll call Grandpa. You'll tell your little study group. I kept my hands at my sides. If you put your hands on me again, I'll call campus security, I said. And if it ever happens anywhere else, I'll call the police. I don't want that. I'm telling you what will happen. I have learned that clarity is kinder than threat. The air shifted. She reached for my arm, stopped halfway, and let it fall. The audience she had in Tasper changed the math. She drew herself up and tried one more time. You're selfish, she said, voice trembling now that the script wasn't landing. You think boundaries make you noble? No, I said. They make me honest. I stepped around her and walked to the doors. No dramatics. No last line. Just feet on pavement. Inside, I finished the forms, turned in my keycard, and tucked a copy of the lab's final report into my bag. When I came back out, the spot where she had been was empty. The heat lifted off the sidewalk in wavering lines. I stood under the same oak and felt a quiet settle where adrenaline had been a few minutes earlier. A person can spend years rehearsing a different outcome for a familiar scene. Then the scene arrives and all you have to do is play the new line once. In the car, I didn't shake. I didn't replay the conversation to grade myself. I texted Grandpa that I was on my way and might stop for groceries. He replied with a thumbs up and the name of a bakery that had good bread on Wednesdays. It felt ridiculous to be that calm after a confrontation that would have leveled me last year. Ridiculous and right. The old script had tried to pull me back into a part that didn't fit. I had declined the role without a speech. I drove east, the road opening like a clear thought. 2 days later, my phone lit up with a long message in the family group thread. The preview showed the first clause, "We choose Madison," and my stomach did the small flip a habit of dread can still cause. I opened it anyway. The paragraphs were dense and certain. I was called ungrateful for leaving. I was accused of humiliating them by involving my grandfather. I was told that if I truly loved the family, I would stop causing division. The final line read, "Don't come back until you're ready to apologize." I read it twice and listened to my own pulse settle. A year ago, those words would have cracked me open. Today, they arranged themselves into something I could finally see clearly. Not a loss, but a verdict that matched the evidence. The empty seats. The qualifications masquerading as care. The requests that were really demands. I put the phone down, turned off the ring, and walked to the kitchen where the window overlooked the maple. Grandpa came in from the garage, wiping his hands on an old towel. He took one look at my face and waited. They made a choice, I said. They put it in writing. He nodded, not unkindly. People do that sometimes, so they don't have to feel their choices, he said. What do you want to do next? The question landed like a key in a lock. No lecture. No outrage on my behalf. Just agency. I'm going to block the thread, I said. And the numbers. And the emails. He nodded again. Do you want me to call them? He asked. No, I said. There's nothing to negotiate. We stood quietly for a minute. Then he went back to whatever he had been fixing. I sat at the table with my phone and opened the settings. Tap, confirm, tap, confirm, tap, confirm. Each small click felt less like slamming a door and more like closing a window against weather I no longer intended to live inside. When I finished, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It had shape and air in it. I took a legal pad from the drawer and wrote a list with 3 columns: school, work, home. Under school, I wrote CWRU orientation and meet with advisor about practicum. Under work, apply for research assistantship, update resume. Under home, lease signed, utilities set, grocery run. The ordinary items steadied me. Life is built out of tasks no one claps for, and that is a mercy. That evening on the porch, I told Grandpa the rest. He listened until I ran out of words, then said, You didn't close the door. You stopped propping it open from the outside. I laughed, surprised at how light the sound felt. We watched the street settle into evening. A couple walked a dog. A kid on a bike practiced rolling no hands past the corner and whooped when he managed 3 seconds. I went to bed without the old itch to check my phone for a change of heart. If an apology ever came, it would not be because I begged for it. It would arrive on its own, if it arrived at all. And then I would decide whether it matched reality or just rearrange the old script with prettier words. I slept hard, the kind of sleep you fall into when the alarm in your chest finally quits. In the morning, I woke before the light and knew something quietly enormous had shifted. I had not lost parents in that text. I had acknowledged that the version of them who could love me the way I needed didn't exist in the form I kept hoping for. Grief came, but it came clean. It made space instead of fog. I made coffee. I emailed my future advisor to confirm a meeting time. When the reply came back with a cheerful welcome aboard, I felt my shoulders drop. Some rooms you enter without anyone needing to be smaller. Those are the rooms you build a life inside. Summer leaned into fall, and the stories that filtered back to me did not arrive as drama. They came as bullet points from old neighbors and a forwarded notice or two. The small accounting firm my parents ran had lost 2 steady clients and 3 part-time staff. An office lease came up for renewal and did not get signed. A for sale sign appeared in front of the Parma house with an agent's phone number and a professional photo that made the yard look wider than it was. I stared at that image too long one afternoon and realized I wasn't trying to talk myself out of calling it sad. It was sad, it just wasn't mine to fix. People in the neighborhood, it turned out, are experts at pretending they don't know what they know until they do. Someone told the story over a backyard fence, and then 3 versions of the story walked down the block in the evening air. They always doted on Madison, one neighbor said, or so I heard. I never saw them at Olivia's things. I didn't take pleasure in any of it. Vindication is a poor substitute for being treated well the first time around. Madison moved into a small 1-bedroom after a month of fall starts. A mutual acquaintance said she was working a standard office job without much shine. Her posts online dwindled from glossy carousels to vague quotes about growth. I didn't laugh. I remembered the feeling of trying to reassemble yourself in a quieter room than you are used to. I hoped she had someone honest in her corner. I hoped she took the first appointment seriously and went back for the second. What surprised me most was how natural it felt not to be the one managing their weather from a distance. In the old days, I would have rearranged my week around a rumor. I would have shown up with casseroles and spreadsheets, the double offering of a daughter who thinks you will see her if she solves things you created. In this season, I kept my calendar. I went to orientation. I learned the bus lines in Cleveland and found the market with the best late Saturday produce. The world did not punish me for letting other people carry the weight that belongs to them. When I signed my lease near University Circle, I ran my numbers a fourth time and smiled at the neatness of the columns. Rent, utilities, groceries, transit, savings. I took a research assistantship that paid less than a full-time job would have and more than my old fear said I deserved. I put my diploma from Ohio State on a floating shelf where it faced the small table where I ate breakfast, a quiet reminder that I had finished what I started even when no one clapped. In September, a letter from the bank addressed to my parents was forwarded to Grandpa's house by mistake. I handed it to him without opening it. He set it aside and said, "We're not their postal service." The sentence held no malice, only a gentle boundary. I realized that even his version of care had changed shape. He had stopped rushing to paper over their choices. He was teaching me, by example, the kind of love that doesn't try to rescue people from their own learning. If there is justice in this part of the story, it is not in anyone's discomfort. It is in the restoration of proportions. Attention returns to its rightful size. Resources flow according to reality instead of fear. A family tries to live on what it actually has instead of on what someone else can be pressed to provide. My job was not to cheer that process on or to monitor it for compliance. My job was to keep building a life I could stand inside without shrinking. I woke most mornings and found, to my quiet surprise, that I was doing exactly that. Fall in Cleveland arrived with hoodies and the smell of rain on Euclid Avenue. I learned the way light collects in the glass of the museum in late afternoon and how the wind cuts sharper off the lake than I had expected. In class, I found my footing faster than I feared I might. Theories I had studied in undergrad met practice in supervising notes and in small moments that mattered, asking a better question, naming a pattern gently enough that someone wanted to keep talking. I was not saving anyone. I was making a space where people could save their own breath. My cohort became the kind of circle I had longed for without knowing it. We traded drafts and snacks and the kind of encouragement that isn't about hype but about noticing. I published a short paper with my advisor on boundary setting in adult children from high-conflict households. The acceptance email made me sit very still for a full minute, not from shock, but from the quiet click of something I had always believed lining up with the world outside my head. Grandpa drove up once a month. He insisted on taking the long way through the cultural gardens so we could talk a little longer. He sat in on a poster session and introduced me to one of my professors as my granddaughter, the one who decides her worth. It embarrassed me and anchored me in equal measure. Afterward, in the parking lot, he said, "Pride looks good on you." I said, "It feels new." He said, "It won't for long." Time does what it does. It moved. The 2 years of the master's program filled and emptied like tides. I completed a practicum that left me certain about the work I wanted to do and clear about the work I didn't. I kept my apartment plant alive. I learned to make a decent lentil soup without measuring. I woke on my birthday and did not wait for a text before deciding to have a good day. It is hard to describe how radical that felt. May 17th, 2026, came on a bright Sunday. The gown was a deep academic green that made the room feel quieter when I put it on. I pinned my hair the way I wanted without asking a mirror if it was too much. On the way to the ceremony, my cohort group chat burned with last-minute notes, where to meet afterward, whose aunt had balloons, who had tissues. I smiled at my phone and put it away so I could watch the city slip past the window. The auditorium filled with a sound that was not the roar of a stadium, but something rounder and more human-sized. I found Grandpa immediately. He was in the front row, a bouquet of sunflowers resting in his lap like he'd brought the sun inside as a backup in case the lights failed. He tipped his chin when he saw me and didn't wave like he didn't want to make me a spectacle. He knows the difference between seeing and showing. When my name was called, Olivia Bennett, Master of Arts in Psychology, Case Western Reserve University, the applause rose up and met me like a soft wall. I crossed the stage, took the diploma, and for a moment let myself stand still enough to feel it land where the last one hadn't. I didn't scan the crowd for empty seats. I looked at the faces that were actually there for me and let the reality of that be enough. I bowed to the dean, turned, and found Grandpa's eyes again. The smile that moved across my face didn't feel like something I had to hold in place. It felt like something that held me. Afterward, in the small knot of people outside, I was pulled into hugs and handed a card somebody had drawn a lopsided cap on. We took pictures that would look ordinary to anyone else and looked like a miracle to me. There was no need to make a speech at the end of it. The lesson was simple and didn't need fancy words. Sometimes the family you come from cannot see you without making you smaller. Sometimes the family you choose refuses to let you disappear. If you have to let go of one to find the other, it isn't betrayal. It's beginning. I tucked the card into my bag, took the sunflowers from Grandpa, and felt their weight. Not heavy, just present. We walked to the car without hurry. The future ahead of me was not a door I had to beg someone else to open. It was one I had learned to unlock, step through, and hold for myself. If you're choosing yourself this year, drop "I choose me" in the comments. Subscribe for more real stories and hard-won lessons each week.